Kingston Town can't win.
Bone Crusher and our Waverley Star, stride for stride.
Cometh the hour, cometh the legend, Winks has done it.
So we're joined here by recently retired champion jockey Glen Boss, 96 times a Group 1 winner and 4 times winner of the Ladbrokes Cox Plate. Bossy, thanks for joining us.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
So we're here to talk about some of our greatest ever champions, and you've ridden 2 of them, Makybe Diva and So You Think. We'll start on Makybe Diva. My first question is about those famous silks. They belong to owner Tony Santic. Firstly, what was your relationship like with Tony, and are you able to touch on what those silks represented?
Yeah, my relationship obviously with the Santic family is pretty strong. It goes back, it's a funny thing, it goes back a little while, and it was almost by, I wouldn't say, there was some really different circumstances around how Tony and I formed this partnership. It was quite different. I was riding a very good horse called Royal Code, trained by David Hall, owned by Tony Santic. I should have won the Australian Guineas on it. I dropped my stick, and that was a defining moment in that colt's career. Could have turned him into a $20 million colt. Got beat, ran second. I was gutted for myself, but I could tell that this was a moment that, you know, I really need to be honest. And I come back in and said to Tony, I've just cost you the Australian Guineas. David Hall, visibly upset, but I was very upset myself. And to Tony's credit, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, son, there'll be another day. And having met Tony later on, having discussions, he said, if you'd bullshitted to me that day and come in with some bullshit story, he said, you would have never ridden for me again. But he said, your honesty got me. And you wouldn't believe it was only like 18 months later that the opportunity to come up to ride Makybe Diva, and there was a few names being thrown around the hat, and Tony went with me. So that was the thing. That moment he said that there'll be another day, and then there was. So then the relationship started with that wonderful athlete called Makybe Diva.
That's a great segue into our next question. So the Diva was your first Cox Plate winner.
Yeah.
And she obviously had established herself as a champion before she made her way here for the Cox Plate. So in 2003 and 2004, she used the Caulfield Cup as her lead up to those Melbourne Cups. What was how did the decision come about to head to the Cox Plate in 2005 instead? Yeah,
I kind of have to beg to differ with you just there slightly, because you can't be called a champion at that distance range and, you know, winning handicaps unless you win the Ladbrokes Cox Plate. That defines you as a champion, and that was foremost in our mind. She'd won 2 Melbourne Cups, she'd won a heap of good races, Australian Cups, Tancred Stakes, and she'd beaten them all up. But Lee Friedman, who was training her, said the one thing that will define her going forward when she retires is that to call her an absolute champion, we have to win the Ladbrokes Cox Plate, because it's the greatest weight for age championship that we have, probably one of the best weight for age races in the world. So that's what we did. We put all our eggs into one basket, and her whole preparation was geared towards winning the Ladbrokes Cox Plate.
I think that answers one of our questions for later, which is it's good stuff. And what about the build-up to the race? She was an even money favourite.
Yeah.
Reportedly, there was 10,000 Makybe Diva masks handed out to the crowd. Did you enjoy the weight of expectation, or were you particularly nervous?
No, I loved it. I mean, there was 2 parts to that question I'll answer. I love the moments. I love the expectation. I really get involved. She had an incredible preparation. She won first up over 1400, got beaten here second up when she wasn't quite right over a mile, which was not her distance. She was ready to go a mile and a quarter. And then she was unbeaten from that point. And so I was enjoying that process, thinking, you know, this is going to be my first Cox Plate. And to take you back how much it means to me, as a 15-year-old kid, I was given a VCR, which you young people don't know what is. And it was the King and the Man. It was Kingston Town and Makybe. It was all about, you know, Makybe winning his 5 William Reeds here, and Kingston Town winning his 3 Cox Plates. So, but the centrepiece of all that was Moonee Valley. So, and I must have watched that VCR 500 times. So it was really ingrained into my psyche as a young kid that this is a race that I must win. I actually wanted to win a Cox Plate before I wanted to win a Melbourne Cup. So that's how important it was to me. So then the enormity of all that started to really set in with me the Friday before the Cox Plate, because I love the Valley. It is basically one of my favourite tracks. It's a real thinking track. You can get away with stuff if you really know the idiosyncrasies of this track. So I loved it. But the Cox Plate, the Ladbrokes Cox Plate is a different beast. On certain tracks, if you lose a bit of ground, if things don't go quite how you want them to, you can kind of make it up somewhere else. At Moonee Valley, if something goes wrong, that's it. Basically, your Cox Plate can be finished in a couple of strides, less than a second. So I felt the weight of expectation there was going to be 30, I don't know how many people here that day, one of the record crowds. Everyone had come to see one thing, and that was to see her win the Cox Plate. She was, like I said, even money favourite. There was only one thing that could stop it happening, and that was the stupid bloke on top. And I used to have great sleeps before majors. I'd have dreams. I would never get beat, always winning. But I remember the night before I was having shocking dreams, because I was starting to feel kind of a bit antsy about this. I didn't want to be that person that stuffed it up for everyone. And I remember I got up in the morning and I really didn't have a good sleep. And Sloane said to me, "You look horrible." I said, I haven't slept. I'm a bit antsy and a bit up and down, a bit up and about. And she said, "You look terrible." I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm not good." And I sort of got to the races and I had a couple of rides early and I kind of didn't feel the rhythm. I wasn't in sync, maybe because I was a bit too tense. I wasn't my relaxed, normal self. And it wasn't until a moment, I always did it before majors, before big events. I go into the bathroom by myself and I look myself down the barrel and into the mirror, look myself down the barrel and tell myself, you trust yourself. You know you're good enough to do the job. You've got the right animal underneath you. And the last thing I would say to myself is relax. And then that was my trigger. And then I just completely go into a place that, I love to go into. This just beautiful magic place where everything just goes, you zone out. I remember walking into the sheds that day and I said, "Have a look at you." You look horrible. I was physically shaking a bit. This is an experience I'd never experienced before. So obviously the Ladbrokes Cox Plate, it was playing tricks with my mind. And I just said, "Have a look at yourself. You just got to calm yourself down." And I couldn't get myself going. So I had to walk out. I walked away and I come back into the bathroom about 2 minutes later. And I started that process, Bossy, you're on the best horse. She's the champion. You're good enough to do this job. And the last thing I said to myself, like, relax. And then it's like, whoa. Then I went straight into that spot. And it all it does is you don't think from that moment on. You just react to things. It's a wonderful, cool place to be in.
And obviously, you touched on the uniqueness of this Valley track, how it's different to others, and there were people saying that they didn't think that the track would suit the Diva, but obviously she came out and proved them wrong, didn't she?
Yeah, she was adaptable. She was out there just to do a job. She didn't care, wet, dry, running backwards. All you do was just point her in the right direction, and she was a willing participant on whatever I asked. It's very rare that you get an athlete that was that in tune all the time. So I was never concerned about that. I love the way that the Valley climbs up the hill and it turns. It's just got this mystique about it. I kind of really get that, and I thought that would really suit her. That climb and being a race where can be virtually the last man standing. And I'm a real history buff, and when you look back over the history of this race and you look at the list of them, champions, there are champions that win this race. There's not many ordinary horses win this race. I know that not every champion wins this race, but when you look at the list, there's been some great champions win this race. So I was very aware that she's on the cusp of being a champion, and she was the best horse in the race. So it starts, when you get introduced to the crowd. They'd play the national anthem. We go back in the rooms and everyone goes into their little place. It's very quiet, and I go and do my thing, and Ollie's doing his thing, and all the other lads, and then when you come back out, to the enclosure, and you go and, talking to people and just about to be legged up, and that's when it's the heart rate starts to really get up.
Can you tell us that for a jockey, that that journey from walking out here with the crowd obviously out here packed and standing around, and then that moment where you get on the horse and you walk through that unique underneath the tunnel through the track, and then just that whole build up and lead up, and then through the race when you come around the corner and you're in front and you win the Ladbrokes Cox Plate. What's that whole journey like and that feeling like? Is it a bit of a blur, or is it just something that'll always be etched in your memory?
Oh, etched in my memory, because it's kind of, what I'd say, we were on their backs for maybe close to 15 minutes, I suppose. I loved it. That was my place. As soon as I got on their backs and I completely zoned out, it was almost like you see the crowd, but you don't see any faces. You don't see, they're there. It's like I wouldn't say it's a blur, but you don't recognise things. You hear noises, but you don't kind of hear the noise. It's a weird sensation, but because you're so into it, right? But when you're walking out here, and then as soon as you come out that little tunnel, it's like a tsunami. You don't hear the noise, you feel it. It's a real physical sensation, and then and all you're trying to do is make sure that your animal, your athlete, is relaxed. So you're trying to keep your heart rate down. It's quite difficult. You don't have far to get down to the starting stalls, and you go out and you go past the stalls and you go down past the school and you go down the bottom hill. Then it starts to become quiet. Then you're in you can really start to get that bond going, and trying to make sure that his heart rate's down, or his or her heart rate's down, and you're trying to keep it all cool. And then you walk into the barriers and you hear the last two are coming in, and honestly, it's almost like the volume is getting turned up because the crowd is starting to get a bit amped up. And as soon as the last one goes in and the caller says, the red light's on, it's like, pull the seat, strap yourself in. That's what it feels like, because now you really, it's an experience that you can't get it any other track. And obviously the barriers break, you get to the winning post the first time, and you can still feel that noise. It's so deafening. And then when you get past you go down and start to turn and go down the hill, you get past a mile, then it all just goes completely quiet, because you just left it all, and you're going down the hill and you can hear each other. There's a bit going on. There's a few talking, and you can hear the hooves, and then you just start to get into your rhythm. You want making sure that your horses, you've got your position. You want to make sure that you're idling at this point. Hopefully, you got your horse to completely switch off, and then you just start to just sort of, there's almost, I'd say there'd be 600 metres there from the 1600 metre mark to about the 1000 metre mark, where you just don't think much. You just kind of just switch off, because you know what's going to come when you get to the 1000. That's when you start to come on board again. This is when the action starts. By the time you get to the half mile, you're on completely sensory overload. Like, you are completely aware of where everyone is. You're it's almost like a computer game. You're sensing everyone around you, how good they're going, who I should be following, who I shouldn't be following, where I should be placed. So you're kind of reading the play a furlong in front of you, because a furlong comes up in like literally 12 seconds, 10, 11 to 12 seconds. So you're trying to be there before you are. So you're scanning, you're feeling your horse, you're feeling what's around you, you're feeling who I should be around, who I shouldn't be around. And by the time you feel like you've gone another furlong, so then you're doing that again. By the time you get to the 600 metre mark and you can hear the crowd again, you can actually start to come into it again. But by then you're completely into your spot. You're so aware of where you should be. And I remember when I went up with no crowd on Sir Dragonet, I was coming through the middle of them, and it was this is a Cox Plate. This is a $5 million weight for age race, and I'm cutting my way through the field and I couldn't hear anything. It was just completely weird, and such a different sensation when I was on Makybe, when, that spectacle of 10 of us in a line, it looked like a straight race at the 600 metre mark, and she come around and the crowd just whoa, just hit me, you know. And she started to surge clear, and I knew I was going to win the race. So, like a lot of previous times being on her back, she put the race to bed pretty quickly, and I had an opportunity to just feel the crowd and, you know, get a sense of that was my first Cox Plate, the one I wanted to win since I was 15. I got to achieve it on, you know, arguably one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen on a racetrack.
And yeah, just elaborating on the actual race itself a little bit more, you jumped from barrier 4 and you were happy to take her back in the field.
Yeah.
What was going through your head when the runs, we know the runs always come early in a Cox Plate, but in 2005 it was even earlier.
Yeah.
What was going through your head at the 800 metre mark?
Oh my God. A few expletive, because I didn't know. Like, you know, you have scenarios. Like, I'm not a real guy who bogs down in form for these big ones. I'm a real ab lib rider. I like to feel it and react to what I feel. And definitely you have scenarios of what possibly might happen. There was not one scenario, I had not envisaged this outcome, where one popped out and then I had to go there, then another one popped out, and it was like, wow, all of a sudden, you know, for a moment there I thought, what is going on here? Like, there was a split second where I went, this is out of control, what's happening? But as soon as that moment left my brain, the next moment was, they've all gone too soon. There's only going to be one person standing at the end of this. Because I was the only one on the bridle still. You know, they were all pushing to get into their spots and all sort of pushing to get out into the clear, and I was actually just doing it on the bridle. So it was like, wow, they've all just gone too soon here. You know, they literally have all gone too soon. And, you know, her ability to stay and sustain, she had this ability where she could come off the mark quick and sprint fast, but she could also sustain it much longer than anyone else. So I had the luxury of sitting there for the journey and going, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to put these people to bed very quickly in a minute. And when I did let her go, and she did what she did on every other occasion, and you know, she put that 2 lengths on him and then maintained that break to the line.
It's Makybe Diva, Fields of Omar and Lateria. Well, the great mares hit the front. Makybe Diva from Lateria. Fields of Omar fighting back, but it's Makybe Diva in front of Lateria. Fields of Omar coming back in the middle, but Makybe Diva, she's the champ. She wins the Cox Plate, 3/4 Lateria.
And after that, a few strides after that race, Stephen King, who was on Fields of Omar that day, famously put his arms around you. Do you remember what he said to you in that moment?
Oh, it was just well done, you know. I was screaming my head off, and of course Stephen and King and I were great friends, and yeah, it's just kind of nice when I lean over and there he was, you know, and he gave me that big pat on the back, and you don't really get that moment, you know, like mate, you're out there doing it for yourself, and we're battling tooth and nail to do it for ourselves, but when you cross the line, we all come together again. It's amazing. You know, it's such an individual sport, but in a team environment, it's crazy, right? So when Kingy came up and did that, and Fields of Omar, who was a champion himself, it was a pretty cool moment. Yeah. So
that's probably the stuff we don't see. Like, we see it on the TV. You cross the line, and we can see that the jockeys do talk. A little bit off topic, but you know what the funniest thing is, or funniest thing you've heard on a racetrack from someone, or that they've said to you either during the race or after the race?
Oh yeah, I was pretty good at it myself. I used to love taking, like, just asking where we were, like, what's going on tonight, what restaurant we're going to. Like, in the mid race, I'll look over and you'll see someone completely in their spot, right? And I just like, hey Ollie, where are we going for dinner tonight? It's like, they look, leave me alone, you know. And just, you know, I just asked a stupid question, you know, and because I don't know, I just felt like I had time to do it, and you could just see someone that was just so locked in. You go, oh, I'm going to pull him out of his spot in a second, you know, and then they get back in the room and say, what the fuck were you doing there? What were you doing, you know? But because it's like us talking now, you know, it's so quiet. It's just like we're virtually touching each other. So yeah, you can pull someone out of their spot pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we'll go to the 2009 Cox Plate. So you think, bit of a stark contrast in terms compared to Makybe Diva, the first one. Being 49.5 kilos, a 3-year-old, you were able to ride at that weight. But how did you come about getting that ride?
Oh, well, he got beaten in the Caulfield Guineas, and Bart rang me about, it would have been 4 or 5 days after the Guineas, I'd say. And his words were, Bossy, I want you to ride this horse this 3-year-old I got in the Cox Plate. He could possibly be the best horse I've ever trained. and I nearly dropped the phone. Like you can imagine, the champion of the GOAT trainer, Bart Cummings, ringing me up to say this could possibly be the best horse I've ever trained. So I was immediately all chips in straight away. I said, yes, Bart. So he had a bit of a ace up his sleeve, as Bart always does. He said, I'm putting blinkers on him because he was missing the start and getting out of his races and getting completely lost and running home well, looking good, but he was a juvenile. You know, he was still not even 3 years old by this point. When he won the Cox Plate, he wasn't officially a 3. So he's a juvenile. But as Bart does, he weaved his magic, and he said to me, I need you at Flemington to jump him out in a barrier trial, because he's never had been tested with blinkers on. He said, but all I want you to do is make him jump, go 100 metres, and then they'd lock him down, and then that's it. That's all you have to do, because all I want to do is see him jump. I remember seeing this unbelievable athlete walk out in front of me, and honestly, the best looking horse I've ever seen in my life, physically put together. It was So You Think. Incredible athlete. So I get on him, and we're in the barriers, and the barriers opening. He just launched, you know, but he was launching a bit quick, right? He was sort of trying to get it done, and I went 100 metres and tried to lock him down, and we got into a bit of an arm wrestle. And, you know, with colts, you don't get into an arm wrestle because there's only ever going to be one winner, and they win, you know, and you end up and you bring each other. Yeah, actually, when I say that, there's two losers. You both lose. He ends up winning, but you both lose because you pull him out of his comfort zone and you rip and tear. And so I thought, if he does this, I'm not going to fight him. I'm going to go with him, and you know, and let him have his way. And then I wasn't envisioning what was going to the outcome of the race, but I had that in my mind. If I'm not going to fight you, whether you're last or second last or wherever you are, I'm going to go with you, let you have your head, and then let you have your way, and then I'll pull you back in after you're satisfied that you've done what you wanted to do. So, yeah, I mean, as we all know, Bart never had he hated his horses leading. That was his one pet hate. And he didn't really bog me down with instructions, but one of them was don't lead. Don't, you know. He didn't care. As long as the horse was relaxed, but, you know, I don't want you leading. And I mean, yeah, I heard him, but I already knew what I knew what I knew, you know what I mean? When I'd ridden the horse in a jump out, I already had that in my mind. If he's going to take control of me, I'm just going to let him do it. So obviously you've seen what happened when the gates opened. My immediate thought was to get him to come back to me, and you could see he went like that with his head, and my immediate next one was I threw the reins at him. Just said, "Okay, boy," and I let him just have his way. You know, he got to the front, and I think what was the masterstroke with the blinkers on, going down the hill past the mile down towards the 12 and a minute, he was kind of lost. Blinkers on, he was kind of didn't know where he was, so he come off the bridle really quick, and just when they do that, they relax because they just go, okay, where am I? They're not fighting you anymore. They're not trying to go fast. He's like half backed off, and that was for me. That was the first moment I thought he'll win because he come off relaxed. I kind of kept enough speed that no one was going to bother me. At 49.5 kilos, I knew that, you know. And when he got down, he completely relaxed, but I knew that the sort of power that I had underneath me, and I thought when I light the wick here, he's gonna give him something to catch. And I think between the 400 and the 200, he broke 10. I round a corner, broke 10 seconds. It's unheard of, right? He was wobbling on one rein, and he still broke 10 seconds for a furlong. That's when he put that gap in him. Extraordinary speed and kind of uncontrolled speed, and then when he straightened up, you know, it was all over.
So You Think is going to go all the way. He's racing clear, and So You Think has bolted in the Cox Plate. Manhattan Rain ran second. The 3-year-olds Quinella at...
Yeah, and that was the birth of a champion. That was, you know, he ended up being a 10-time Group 1 winner, won another Cox Plate, was voted the world's best horse, I think, 2 consecutive years. So that was the birthplace of what was a champion, right?
So staying on 2009 quickly, obviously plan didn't unfold how you pictured it to go for the race, but when did you think when did you know you had it? Was it coming around that corner when you felt him and you knew you had more to give?
Yeah, when I got to when I got past the mile and I got down towards the 1400 metre mark, towards the 1200, and he'd completely come off the bridle, and like he went from being this unruly charging colt to a real proper racehorse in the space of 200 or 300 metres. I had a sense of, wow, they're going to have to be. I mean, I didn't underestimate the field behind me, but I kind of knew what I had underneath me, and I thought, wow, they're going to have to be pretty good to beat me with 49.5, because I knew that once I lit the wick and put him on fire, he was going to go very, very quick. I didn't know he was going to break 10, but I knew he was going to go very quick with the weight. So I was really comfortable throughout the whole race that I wouldn't say I was confident of winning the whole race, but I was confident that whatever beats me is going to have to put up one big effort, yeah.
And going past the winning post, Greg Miles, champion caller, he said that's probably the greatest training triumph that Bart Cummings has produced in his entire career.
Yeah.
What can you tell us more about Bart, and where do you think that victory ranked amongst his great achievements?
Oh, you only have to see the footage of when he won that race. He did have a tear in his eye. Like, he was physically shaken after the race. I'd never seen Bart like that. Bart's very... He might be feeling something internally, but he won't show it externally. But that day he showed it externally. Dado Chinam was there. But you could actually... Yeah, I remember I give Bart a big kiss and a hug, and I could tell that that one really meant a lot to him. I think, like I said, 10 days before, he when he made that phone call, he said, this could be possibly the best horse I've ever trained. Like, what a statement. And then he's got this not even 3-year-old, wins a Cox Plate. Arguably, all it is, it's our greatest race. Yeah, I think it really meant a lot to him, that one, because I think it was almost like his baby, It was really the one that he moulded, and he sort of got that horse to do. Must have been a point of an amazing job well done for him too, because he kind of moulded that horse to get him to do that. He had all those aces up his sleeve, all those little tricks he used, and it come to plan on the day. So it must have been an amazing experience for him.
You mentioned Dardo, and that that famous relationship that him and Bart had, and those famous chessboard silks.
Yep.
Did you have a good relationship yourself with Dardo, and what was he like? He was such a passionate racing man.
Oh, an absolute gentleman, a true gentleman, and he understood the race. He understood racing. He knew the history. Very, very deep thinking, intelligent guy. So, yeah, he was one of them guys. When you meet, you kind of know, well, this bloke's pretty special. Even if you didn't know him, and you got to shake his hand and meet him, you go, well, I reckon I've met someone pretty cool, pretty special. That's what sort of person he was. Yeah, always happy. The dinner that night, and he was caught in getting quite late in his years, then in the wheelchair at the races, but you could just see the excitement that he got out of winning the Ladbrokes Cox Plate, because it was kind of, a defining moment in his life, And
Reg Fleming, he's a stable foreman for Cummings, and he's still doing it now with Godolphin, obviously, with James. He said after the race to journalist Matt Stewart, "You want to know how special he is? If I'm having a bad day, I'll go into his box with him. After that, I'm having a good day. Does that explain it to you?" What can you tell us about how much So You Think meant to him and the stable?
Oh, well, Reg is an incredible individual. He's incredibly passionate and is in love with the animal, as I am. And I'm pretty confident the day that So You Think walked into his barn, he was in love, Everyone who had anything to do with that horse was in love, but Reg got to work with him every day, and you can't underestimate the hours and the time that Reg put into that horse as well, because Bart's not here all the time. So Reg is just a bigger part of the story as Bart was, because Reg was in the coalface every day, making sure every box was ticked perfectly, So I mean, it's a massive team effort, but at the front of the ship is, you got Bart, but his co-pilot is Reg, right? And he's just as important. I'm pretty confident that was, like I said, a sense of achievement and a job well done that you've actually, and a bit of a relief too, all mixed up in that emotion that you've actually just got that job done, and Yeah, and I'm pretty confident that, you know, like myself, I was in awe of that animal. Like, just looked at him with it. Well, this is one of the sexiest horses I've ever laid eyes on. He was a rock star, mate. You know, he knew he was a rock star. So you do fall in love with that type of horse just because of the physical presence of the animal. But then you got something like that's good. That he's that good as well. You know, your levels of excitement and your levels of love just go up even higher because you have so much respect for him.
And he obviously, you said he was a rock star. He was a great looking horse. Winning the Cox Plate is fantastic at the time for the horse and the trainer, the jockey. But then also retirement phase, you know, being a stallion. You know, he's gone on to be a champion stallion. Did you always think he was going to be a great sire?
Oh, he had to be. Yeah, you can't have that. You can't be that good looking, and have that speed and that power and that stamina, and not throw that through to your progeny. He was such a dominant individual, so his dominance was always going to be put through to his progeny. So, yeah, it's no shock to me, you know, at all. He was just a big footprint left in, you know, like when his racing career finished, it was never going to stop there. You know what I mean? It was always going to keep going for the next sort of 18 years of his breeding life. You know.
And so we've touched on Makybe Diva, and So You Think. What similarities and differences were there between the two horses, and what weapons did one have that maybe the other didn't, and vice versa?
Well, they weren't. The only similarity that they had, they were both champions, and they both obviously won the Ladbrokes Cox Plate, but they were different. They were different beasts. You know, he was a big, raw, you know, big colt, very aggressive. Where she was just the whole package, you know, like she was obviously very dominant mare, but the calm one, you know, just went out. You know, she was the willing participant. She was always waiting on my command, where he was, you know, you're along for the ride kind of thing, you know, where she was always waiting for me to make my move for her to react. So they were different in that respect of rides. He was, I have to get you to, I'm trying to get your heart rate down, you know, and she was like, man, I can't even feel this thing's ticking over underneath me. It's just like another day at work kind of thing, you know, and yeah, they were different beasts.
And obviously, you've ridden some great champions in your time, So You Think, and Makybe Diva being two of them. Are they the two best you've ever ridden? And I mean, I'm not going to get you to compare and rank them from 1 to 2, but they're your two best. How do they kind of compare as horses? Yeah,
like I've often said it, and I'll say it till I'm dead. I got to ride on a race, you know, under race conditions, two champions, and So You Think and Makybe Diva were the two. And I've ridden some amazing horses, I promise you. But to be, you know, when you single out the great horses from the champions, there is a difference. And they shouldn't get the two mixed up. There's some great horses around, but there's a difference. A champion has to have a longevity. They have to win majors. They have to do it over a certain amount of time, and they have to beat great horses, you know, to become champions. And I think that term gets thrown around very loosely, and I hate it. Because it should only be reserved, because the champions are the pinnacle, right? This is what you want to be. It should only be reserved for people who actually are, or racehorses that actually are champions, you know? So, yeah, I mean, to be privileged enough to ride two of them and win 2 Cox Plates, and that's what it takes to win a Cox Plate. History says it. You have to be basically a great horse or a champion to win it. So, to feel the energy and the raw power of two different champions, getting from A to B very differently, but both doing the same job. It's quite unique.
Well, I think that's all our questions. Bossy, you've been brilliant. And
thank you.
It's been awesome to reflect on those 2 Cox Plate victories, so thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to sit here and, this is feels like home for me, actually, you know, so it's a pretty cool place. It's nice to come back here and relive those great memories. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bossy.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you.